beautiful souls. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Carolyn and this channel is all about true crime, mystery, and anything abnormal. I highly recommend subscribing because this channel is definitely a vibe. So let's get right into today's story. Today's story is about Carly Scott. Now, Carly went by the name Charli. That's what all of her friends and family members called her, and that was her preferred name. So I'm going to be referring to her as Charli throughout the video. Charli was a beautiful free spirit who loved life, and she had a really cool style. She had this sort of 50s pinup girl look, and it just matched her and her personality perfectly. I wasn't able to find out much about Charli's childhood, but from her family and friends, she seemed like she had a really amazing life. As I mentioned, she was a free spirit. So in 2004, she decided that she was going to move to Hawaii, specifically Maui. She was really enjoying living in Hawaii, and I mean, who wouldn't? Can't imagine a more beautiful place to live. In 2009, Charli met a man named Stephen Bianco, and the two of them ended up moving in together. Charli was head over heels in love with Stephen. Stephen, however, did not feel the same way about Charli. Though the two of them lived together for 2 years as a couple, Stephen would tell people they were just roommates, and he would specifically go out of his way to try to avoid his picture being taken with Charli. Charli was a very loving, nurturing woman, and she loved to take care of Stephen. She would do all of the cooking and cleaning, and what did Stephen do? He played video games and worked on his truck. So this relationship was really off balance. And I think probably all of us have experienced seeing someone in a type of relationship like this. You have one person who is madly in love with the other one, and then the other person, they're not really that into the person that's so in love with them, but they're willing to use that person and their love for them to benefit themselves. And that is exactly who Stephen was. He was willing to take advantage of anyone if it benefited him. And regarding how this would feel for Charli, did not seem to factor into any decision this man ever made. Stephen would regularly refer to Charli as an bitch, which if a man is calling you that, honey, you gotta go. That is not acceptable behavior. He would also tell his friends that he hated her. Eventually, Stephen and Charli ended up breaking up, but they kind of were on and off for quite a number of years. And I think this was really just Charli was still in love with Stephen, and Stephen thought, this is a good opportunity for me to take advantage of someone. Stephen was really just using Charli for sex. And unfortunately, it didn't seem to matter how badly Stephen treated Charli. Charli would always come running whenever Stephen called because she was madly in love with him. In the fall of 2013, Stephen met a new woman by the name of Cassandra. The two really hit it off, but Cassandra had already planned to leave Maui and go back to Pennsylvania, which is where she was from. Even though the couple had only dated for 3 weeks when Cassandra moved back to Pennsylvania, the two of them decided that they wanted to be together. So the plan was Cassandra had moved back to Pennsylvania, but then they decided, okay, no, we want to be together. So she was then going to move from Pennsylvania back to Maui. Even though Stephen and Cassandra claimed to be madly in love with each other, the two of them cheated on each other constantly. One of these times when Stephen found out that Cassandra had cheated on him, he decided to go to a bar to have a few drinks, blow off some steam, And who happened to be at the bar? Charli. And after a couple drinks, the two of them decided to go and have sex together. And although in Stephen and Cassandra's relationship, there was a lot of cheating on both sides, it didn't seem to be that big of a deal to the two of them. They seemed to kind of be okay with it, and they continued their relationship. That October, which was 1 month after Charli had run into Stephen at the bar, and she had found out she was pregnant. Charli knew immediately that Stephen was the father because she had not been with any other men during that period, but Stephen was furious that she was pregnant and he demanded a paternity test. Stephen told Charli he was never going to be part of her life and he was never going to be part of the baby's life. It didn't matter to him what the paternity test came back showing. He was not going to be there financially, emotionally, in any capacity. Probably, in my opinion, because this man doesn't seem to have a soul, and I don't think he could ever be there for a single person for any reason. But he definitely pressured Charli in him wanting her to terminate the pregnancy. Charli really wanted to have the baby, regardless of whether or not Stephen was going to be involved. She was excited she was pregnant and she really wanted to have this baby. But Stephen convinced her to go for a consultation at Planned Parenthood, and she reluctantly agreed to go with him. During the visit to Planned Parenthood, the two had a meeting with the director there, and it was very clear that there was a lot of tension between Charli and Stephen, and it was clear that this really wasn't something that Charli wanted to do. But in this meeting that they had, Charli did agree that she would return at a later date and terminate the pregnancy. But Charli knew in her heart that she wanted to have this baby and she could do it without Stephen. She had lots of family and friends and she was an extremely capable woman who could manage this on her own. And on Christmas Day, when the family was all gathered together, Charli made the announcement that she was 3 months pregnant and she was having a boy and she was going to name him Joshua. Her family was a little shocked by the news, but they were excited for her because they knew she was really excited and everybody was on board to be there to help her. Charli had not spoken to Stephen since they had the meeting at Planned Parenthood, but obviously she had decided she was going to have this baby on her own. She was going to be an absolutely amazing mother to this little baby Joshua that was coming along soon, and she really felt supported by her friends and family and knew that without Stephen, she could do this and do this really well. Charli's half-sister Fiona did have some concerns about the pregnancy, and she was concerned to know whether or not Stephen actually knew about the baby. I myself don't understand this at all. If she wanted this information, I don't know why she didn't just talk to Charli and ask Charli, her sister, what was going on. Instead, she decided to text Stephen. So Fiona sent the text to Stephen asking if he was aware that he was the father of Charli's baby. Stephen replied to Fiona saying, "How do you know? She was supposed to have this taken care of." He had no idea that Charli had changed her mind and was going to raise the baby on her own. And frankly, it's not really any of his goddamn business, because if he wanted to be involved, Charli was more than willing to allow him to be part of this baby's life. But you know what? If you want to be a piece of shit and you don't want to have anything to do with the baby, leave Charli alone and let her do her own thing and raise her child. Fiona had also called Stephen, and apparently Stephen was all panicked and frantic and saying, I thought she took care of this and didn't know that this was like an issue anymore. And his only concern was Cassandra. So the woman that I had mentioned earlier that he was dating, who had moved back to Pennsylvania, she was coming soon to move back to Maui to be with Stephen. And Stephen did not want Cassandra to know about Charli or the baby. And the phone call ended with Stephen telling Fiona, I need to talk to Charli. Stephen finally eventually told Cassandra about the baby. He said that, first of all, he didn't know if it was his. It wasn't me. They caught me on camera. It wasn't me. He also told Cassandra that Charli had agreed to not have the baby. Cassandra was only 21 years old, and this was a lot of information for her to take in. So she told Stephen she needed a little bit of time to think about things. Cassandra eventually, after a while, called Stephen and told him that he should be taking responsibility for his child. She was not interested in being with some guy who was a deadbeat dad who didn't take care of his children, or child in this case. Because if he's not going to take care of that child, he's probably not going to take care of any children. So maybe he should wrap it up and not have children. Just a thought. But Stephen's response to Cassandra was that he had no feelings for Charli. He had never had any feelings for Charli. And Cassandra, she's not talking about Charli. She's talking about his child. She's not saying to him, you need to go be in a relationship with Charli. She's saying, you need to be a responsible human being and take care of the baby that's soon to arrive. On the evening of February 9th, Charli was hanging out with her 4 sisters and her mom at her sister Brooke's house. Her sister Brooke had recently found out that she was pregnant as well. The two of them were really excited. They were going to get to experience pregnancy together. They were going to have children at the same time and be the same age, and their kids could be best friends. And they were both really excited that they were going to get to go through this experience together. So everyone in Charli's family was really, really excited. Another exciting thing that happened that night was Brooke was feeling Charli's stomach, and she got to feel Joshua kick for the first time. So it just made everything more real, more exciting, and everything seemed to be going really, really well for everyone in the family. Around 8 p.m., Charli was getting tired and she decided that she was going to go home. So she gave everyone hugs, told them she loved them, and went outside, got in her car, and drove away. What the family didn't know was that was the last time they would ever see Charli. Charli only lived a few miles away from her mother, so they had planned that the next day when Charli was heading to work, she was going to drop off some of her laundry at her mother's house. The next morning when Charli didn't show up, her mother just assumed that she had gone straight to work and decided not to stop by to drop off laundry. She texted Charli. She didn't get a reply, but she assumed Charli's working, so she will get back to me when she has some time. As the day went on, Charli's mother, Kimberlyn, had tried calling and texting Charli throughout the day, and she was getting no response, and she started to get a little bit worried about why her daughter wasn't responding, because it was very much out of Charli's character. By 9 p.m., Kimberlyn, her mother, and her sisters were getting extremely, extremely worried about Charli, because not only was her mother trying to get a hold of her, now all of her sisters were trying to get a hold of her, and she wasn't responding to anyone. And Charli was really responsible. She wouldn't just ignore all of her family members. They were all very close. And if she was busy, she'd send them a text saying, you know, I'm busy right now. I'll text you, call you when I can. But they were getting radio silent. Nothing was coming back from Charli when they tried calling or texting. Kimberlyn and Charli's sister, Phaedra, decided that they were going to go to Charli's house to see what was going on. When they arrived at Charli's house, her Toyota 4Runner was in the driveway and the house was locked. But Kimberlyn, her mother, had a key to her house, so they went inside using the mother's key. As soon as they went in the house, things seemed suspicious. Charli had 2 dogs, and they were her babies, and she took extremely good care of both of her dogs. So when the mom and the sisters arrived at the home, one of the dogs was there, but the dog had been left without food or water, and the other dog was missing. And the family was concerned because they knew that no matter what, Charli always took very good care of her dogs. Kimberlyn then remembered that her and Charli shared an app that you could go on to the app and find the location. Kind of like Find My Phone on iPhones. It was like an app that they had both downloaded. So the mother and Charli, and I don't know if the other sisters were part of it, but we know the mother and Charli had this app. So both of them at any time could go into the app and see where the other one was located, or where their phone was located. When her mother went on to check her location, the last place her phone pinged was just before 11 p.m. the night before. The ping was in a very remote area on the northern coast of Maui. It was an absolutely beautiful location, but it made absolutely no sense that Charli would have gone there at 11 o'clock at night the night before. Charli was now 5 months pregnant, and with this ping and the location of it, her family was now terrified. The family immediately knew if Charli was going somewhere to meet someone and she wasn't telling her family about it, the only person she could be going to meet was Stephen. They then called the police and reported Charli as missing. At 5:30 a.m. the next morning, the police went to Stephen's house to question him. Stephen told police that the night before, Charli had come by to give him a ride to his truck, which had broken down on the side of the road. So Stephen is claiming that Charli came to his house, picked him up, drove him to his broken down truck. And the police's first question was, where was the truck broken down at? And it just so happens that his truck conveniently had broken down at the exact location that Charli's phone had last pinged. According to Stephen, Charli had driven him to his truck. He had done a little bit of work on his truck, and then all of a sudden the truck was now working again. He then claimed that he had driven his truck back to his house, and Charli was following behind him in her vehicle. He said as they were driving back, he could see her headlights behind him. Eventually, he said that he was driving faster than she was, and eventually he lost sight of her headlights. Police asked Stephen, where were you when you lost sight of Charli's headlights? And it happened to be about 20 minutes away from where Charli lived. Stephen claimed that when he got home that night, he had texted Charli, thank you. She had never responded, and that was all he knew. Sure, Stephen, that's all you know? Oh, very believable. Police and family and friends all started searching along the highway because they thought possibly Charli had gotten into an accident, maybe she had gone off the road, and maybe she was stuck somewhere and she needed help. So they searched up and down that highway, just looking for any clue or any sign that Charli had been there. They had searched a 40-mile area. They were looking for anything along the road that looked like maybe a car had gone off the side of the road and driven through some bushes, or maybe there were skid marks on the road. They were just looking for any sign that any type of accident could have happened. And they searched until nightfall and they found nothing. The next morning, Charli's second dog, so the dog that was not in her home, was found. But the dog was found 8 miles from where Stephen said he had last seen Charli's headlights. The problem is the dog was in perfect condition. The dog was clean, and the road that the dog would have had to travel to get the 8 miles from where Charli had last been seen, he would have been dirty, first of all. He would have had dirty paws. He may have had scuffs. It was really, really rugged terrain that the dog would have had to go these 8 miles. But when they found the dog, he looked perfectly groomed and not dirty at all. His paws were perfect. So it didn't make any sense that he himself had walked those 8 miles. And the family knew that Charli would never have willingly left her dog alone. That same afternoon, the police found Charli's vehicle. It was a 1997 Toyota 4Runner, and when they found the car was on its side and completely burnt out. It was burned so badly, the only thing remaining was the metal parts of the car. So whoever had burned this had been a huge fire that literally completely destroyed the entire car, leaving only the metal frame. And fire sure is a way to destroy evidence. It was also determined that an accelerant had been used on the passenger side of the car. The area was quite remote, so there were some houses in the area, but they were very spread out. So police canvassed the neighbors closest to where the car was found, and a number of the neighbors claimed that they had smelled something burning the night before, but no one was assuming that there was anything nefarious about it. They just thought someone was having a fire. Charli's father then flew from the mainland along with other family and friends. They all descended on Maui, and the plan was to search. Also, a lot of the residents as well took part in this search, and people were donating search dogs, helicopters. Everyone was doing whatever they could to try to locate this 5-month pregnant woman. As hard as everyone was searching and hoping that Charli would be okay, the condition her car was found in really didn't leave a high likelihood that Charli would be found alive. A search team found a pair of jeans along the highway, and they were bloody. The blood was tested and turned out to be Charli, and there was also hair in the pocket of the jeans that was Stephen's DNA. So the search had mostly been happening along the highway that Charli supposedly would have been traveling. Her family then decided, because they weren't really coming up with anything, they decided they were going to go to the area where her phone last pinged, and they were going to search there. When they arrived, Stephen was there. Stephen was shocked that they were there and nervous. He did offer to help search, but the family was so sus of this guy at this point, they asked him not to help with the search and to leave, which he did. Not long after the search had begun, they found a DVD of the movie Twilight, and Charli's sister knew that Charli had a DVD of Twilight in her car. Next, a long black skirt was found, and the family identified that this is what Charli had been wearing the last time they saw her. The alarming thing about the skirt being found is that there were 20 puncture wounds. Okay, they're not wounds if it's closed. There were 20 punctures in the skirt, and if Charli had been wearing the skirt, all of those puncture wounds would have been to her abdomen. Considering she's pregnant, this is quite significant. The next thing that was discovered was a green blanket, and her sisters were able to identify that this was a blanket that Charli normally kept in her car. The blanket, when it was found, was covered in maggots. And if you're searching for a missing person, the last thing you want to find is maggots. Searches were still going on, and the police decided they needed to take a much closer look at Stephen, and they needed to find out a lot more information from him. In the search, police ended up finding fingernails, red hair, in which Charli had red hair. They found some bone fragments, but the worst discovery was they found a jawbone that had been split in half. DNA would later match all of this to Charli. They had just discovered Charli's broken in half jawbone. Marks on the jawbone led police to believe that somebody had dismembered Charli's body or attempted to. At this point, the only thing that they had found was the two halves of the jawbone, but they ended up finding a lot more. Through the search, they ended up finding more and more body parts, and it became clear that Charli had been murdered. 5 months pregnant, murdered, and then dismembered and discarded along the side of a highway. Stephen was kind of the obvious suspect, but they wanted to take their time building a case against Stephen. They wanted to make sure that they had a rock solid case before they decided to go any further. And so at this time, they had only listed Stephen as a person of interest. But 4 months later, police were then ready and Stephen was arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder and third-degree arson in the state of Hawaii. I don't know if it's changed now, but at the time, there was no charge that could be brought against someone for ending the life of an unborn child. So if you kill a pregnant woman, you can be charged with her murder, but not the baby that she's carrying. Stephen's story was super lame from the beginning, but it just completely fell apart as more and more evidence piled up against him. And although a lot of the evidence against Stephen was circumstantial, there was just so much circumstantial evidence that the police now had a pretty strong case against Stephen. When the FBI analyzed Stephen's phone, the place that he had claimed that Charli had driven him to fix his truck to pick up, he had not been anywhere near that area that night. he never came within 20 miles of the area that he claimed that he had been in with Charli. Stephen then claimed when the truck broke down, okay, so the truck never broke down. Let's just be clear. The truck never broke down. But the night that he's claiming, the night that he is claiming the truck broke down, he tells police his friend Kyle picked him up and drove him to work the next day because his truck was broken down, I don't know, 20, 30 miles away. When the police interviewed Kyle, he said, hell no, that's not true. I didn't pick him up and I have no idea what he is talking about. I don't think he even knows what the hell he's talking about. Police then checked the CCTV at his work, and just before 7 o'clock that morning, the CCTV footage shows him arriving at work in the truck that's supposedly broken down, and he goes into work. Not only that, during his day at work, a friend of his that he worked with, that he gave rides to often, told Stephen that he had left his backpack in his truck, and this friend on that day went out to the truck and retrieved his backpack. So Stephen, you don't have a story anymore. It's all gone. Hopefully you will be too. Even Stephen's grandfather testified that Stephen had left for work in his truck that morning. The other thing is that Stephen had a pretty significant injury to his hand. If we know anything about true crime, which I'm sure you do if you're watching this, when you use a knife on someone, whether it is to take their life or try to take apart their body, you usually will injure yourself. The person committing the crime ends up cutting themselves. It's very hard to do that to someone and not end up cutting your own hand, especially if you're going to then be taking apart the whole body. The thing about the injury to his hand is he had told 3 different people 3 different stories of how he injured his hand. Everything about Stephen's story was a lie, and his cell phone showed that he had been in the location where Charli was killed that night. Exactly how Charli was killed is not clear, but I think from the stab wounds to her abdomen in the skirt that she was wearing, and obviously her body had been taken apart. So even though, even to today, we don't know the exact details, we know that this absolutely horrendous man took this beautiful, free spirit, 5 months pregnant, amazing woman and ripped her and that child who was his from this world. On December 28th, 2016, the jury came back with a guilty verdict, and Stephen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And he will rot in prison until the day he dies. That's the end of today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you all are having an absolutely amazing summer. I am loving it. There's a lake really, really close to my house, so I'm able, whenever I have weather that's nice enough, I get to go swim in the lake. So I hope all of you are getting out, getting some sunshine, and doing whatever you enjoy to do in the summer. And I just want to say a huge thank you for sticking around, listening to this story, and I will see you in the next one.